Bitter. It's all so bitter. The curl of my lip is bitter. Time, things, the inanimate objects I've stacked up around me, all of which have outlived their purpose, all of which are bitter. Nothing to be said for objects. My friend Yuri has a Japanese girlfriend, totally flat-chested. He's 68 with a 3-ounce prostate. She's 40 and flat-chested. It's also bitter. The night is bitter. Night. No love, no closeness, drifting in and out of sleep. Jean told me someone or other had written a beautiful piece on insomnia. Asshole. Last night I woke up at 5 in the morning needing to shit. It's all his fault. He vetoed my All-Brand. Consequently, I have to shit at 5 o'clock in the morning. Stupid idiot completely sabotaged my rhythms. What good's it to me if someone or other writes a piece about insomnia? Yuri, now he sleeps. He's always been able to sleep. When I can't sleep, I think of Yuri. Fast asleep after parsimoniously depositing a little semen in his Japanese piggy bank. Sleeping with women is bitter. I can't stay in bed with a woman, with certain exceptions. The black girl at the plaza, for example, there was some sort of contact with the black girl. It more or less worked. Not the sex, but the closeness, the rub of the flesh. The more elementary the woman, the more comfortable I feel in bed. The cruder she is, the less she interests me in life, the better I feel in bed. Animals rubbing together, nothing else is left. The basic question is, wouldn't I in fact be better off sleeping with an animal? Sex is bitter. Bitter, always has been. No question of a biography. Absolutely. Absolutely no question of a biography after I'm dead. That's what I have to say to that lawyer. The biography of a writer, absolutely ridiculous. Who knows the first thing about anybody's life? I mean, who can say anything remotely coherent about anybody else's life? Who can say anything remotely coherent about life in general? Did I write what I wanted to write? No, never. I wrote what I was capable of writing, not what I wanted to. All you can ever do is what you're capable of. How can your complete works, your contribution added to the world, and by the way, all the great laws of nature work on the principle of subtraction. How can your complete works be anything more than a mishmash of approximations, of constantly shifting boundaries? Isn't the end result inevitable failure? Only anonymous writing can hope to avoid failure. All those idiots discussing their intentions, all those idiots shoveling out opinions, not one of them will admit the whole thing slipped away. The material's uncontrollable. I can't remember the original idea, and all that's left is what came limping into port. All those poor buggers assessing their contribution to the world with furrowed brow, the great providers of opinions who turn up on the books programs. Well, and you're not one of them, I suppose? No. What do you mean, no? No, I've never appeared on a books program, never gone near a books program. Only because you're a snob, old boy. You've done enough other things. Lectures you've given, interviews, God knows how many. Innumerable functions in your honor. And as for the knitted brow, no need to worry. Yours certainly is. Now, this minute, your brow is furrowed. Maurice Naguir is crazy about his daughter. She came 47th out of 83 in the Evelyn's Challenge Cup. She's a big girl. I thought jockeys were supposed to be midgets. The Evelyn's Challenge Cup. Oh, what should I do? How should I proceed? What should I do? See him? Follow Jean's advice and just turn up? Have a coffee in town as if nothing's happened? Talk about the weather? If she says he's 51, he's probably twice that. On the other hand, I can't go on ignoring him. That would definitely be a mistake. I mean, for Christ's sake, a father has a right to object to his daughter marrying a man with one foot in the grave. Jean says he's very nice, quite interesting even, except you can't hear what he's saying. An inaudible voice in our family has been stentorian for generations. You can't have a son-in-law with an inaudible voice. Sooner or later, inaudibility will provoke you to the worst excesses. Oh, Natalie, why couldn't you have been mad on horses like Maurice's daughter? You could have brought me back some nice sporty type, some nice boy, pink from forest breezes, whom I could have molded. Molded? In what way? Molded in every way into whatever makes a good son-in-law. But how can you mold a 51-year-old who's pushing 70 and inaudible? Jean was wrong to tell me he was inaudible. That was the final blow. Have a coffee in town as if nothing's happened, huh? Well, how can we pretend nothing's happened? Anyway, I never have a coffee in town. Whole idea's a non-starter. Oh, what should I do? Yet again, no idea. The captain of a lost ship.
There's always a photograph to look at. Photograph to keep you company during the trip. In a tram in Prague in 1964. There's a man sitting by the window looking out. He has a high forehead and his eyes are sad. He's 60. He's holding his hand in front of his mouth in an attitude of contemplation, which half conceals his face. He's looking out. Outside, there's a man standing on the pavement with his hands in his pockets, watching the tram go by. In the positions in which they find themselves, you could imagine that the two men were looking at each other. In fact, the two men are unaware of one another. This encounter has no effect on either of them. They don't even see each other. What is it they're both looking at? The familiar course of time. That's all they're looking at. Time taking its familiar course. If what happens purely by chance, there'd be no reason to dwell on this image. There'd be no reason to dwell on anything. My friend Serge is dead. The world I'm looking at is a world in which my friend Serge no longer exists. In his room at the hospital, in a drawer, there was a photograph of his mother, passport photo. He took his mother with him for protection. He was 76, a man who had been in positions of authority all his life, a grandfather himself, a man who you could say was more of a man than most. And he brought his mother with him to keep in a drawer at his bedside table. I ought to do it, but I don't dare. Oh, what does it matter anyhow? And yet it does matter. Suppose I summon up the courage to approach him between now and the time we arrive. Well, I can't just sit here in silence without drawing attention to this coincidence in some way or another and start reading The Unexpected Man. If I take The Unexpected Man out of my handbag, I have to lean towards him and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Parsky, it just so happens I'm in the middle of reading The Unexpected Man, and naturally I wouldn't be so insensitive as to read it in front of you." He'll acknowledge me with a little smile, and any conversation will be impossible because that is the stupidest thing you could say.
On the bridge, the sailors run in all directions, some of them shouting, "The captain knows," others insisting, "The captain doesn't know." I go back to my cabin, the little Chinaman's there. "Pick up the rattle," I tell him. "Come on, little Chinaman, spin the rattle, assault my eardrums." I shan't write any more. The captain will be my last. Yuri must be in Buenos Aires by now. Gone off with his Japanese on his Antarctic cruise. That's right. It's the sort of trip you make when you've been around the world 36 times. You're in the twilight of your life, and what's left to you? Penguins. Neurotics are the cream of humanity. Inaudible? Oh, no, no, no. Mrs. Serda gets more and more cantankerous. Jean says to me, everyone else has a normal secretary. You have to have Mrs. Serda. Well, I have Mrs. Serda because my boy, Mrs. Serda, has been my secretary for 20 years, which makes her absolutely irreplaceable. Yes, you have Mrs. Serda, who has her period 30 days in the month and doesn't even know how to switch on the computer. Well, good for her. Stupid thing buying that computer. We were fine. What did we need with a computer? Huh? The face and figure she's got, how could you be pleasant? She's bound to have complexes, the poor woman. All right, so she has complexes. She's not the first woman to be born ugly. Curl of my lip. It's bitter. Has it turned bitter because I'm bitter? Or have I turned bitter through brooding on this physiological bitterness? Oh, the feeling of getting old is bitter. Ooh, yes, shriveling up is bitter. I wasn't a bitter writer. No, I never wrote with bitterness. I shan't write anymore. The captain of a lost ship will definitely be my last. A clean book, straight up and down. The man I still hope to become.
My friend Serge didn't like your books. It was our only quarrel. He didn't like your short sentences, your repetitions. He blamed you for your world view. Negative, he used to say. No, not at all negative. I've never thought you were negative, Mr. Parsky. Quite the contrary. All the same, what a coincidence. What a coincidence to find you sitting in front of me in this compartment. Serge, who didn't like your books and didn't like what he saw of you behind your book, said that your great stroke of luck was to have known how to make yourself lovable to me. He said that whenever he read you, he was searching for that invisible quality which made me love you. In the same way, not that I'd ever tell you this, I listened over and over again to that piece by Orlando Gibbons you're always talking about. What attracted me towards you in the first place was I was going to say your love, but that's not the word. No, that's not the word at all. Your nearness to music, your bond with music, as if the key or the lack of key to everything was to be found there. As if music was the thing in the world most lacking from the world. And that's what you were searching for, since you wanted no truck with eternity as such. My desires have always outstripped whatever actually happened. Nothing ever lives up to desire, no. And you see, I can't understand why it is we're capable of desiring so much when in the end we feel so little. You talked about this, Mr. Parsky, in A Passerby Like Any Other, where you're troubled about God and afraid that just like the things you have experienced, God himself might not live up to your desire. Let's come down to earth, dear pretentious Mr. Parsky. Would you live up to my desire? You with your highly polished shoes and your aristocratic fingernails, your mid-century elegance. On the other hand, I could fetch out the unexpected man and not say a word. Read without raising my eyes, occasionally looking out of the window as if gripped by a fleeting thought. I've spent my life with you, Mr. Parsky. That's to say, I've spent a few recent years of my life with you, which all the same means I've spent my life with you, because to arrive as close to you as I feel I have, I first had to reach the age I am and experience everything in the way I've experienced and understood it. To be able to follow you down your road to what looks like excess, I've had to practice all my life. This is what I think. You manufacture yourself. You shape the raw material, then you lay it open to the unexpected. For a long time, I've been attracted by people who don't care for the world and are tormented by non-stop suffering. It seemed to me that the desperate were the only profound, the only really attractive people. Fundamentally, if I'm honest, I thought them superior. For a long time, I felt myself to be less interesting, not to say less admirable, because I loved life. Whereas you claim not to love anything. You complain about everything. But in your rage, in your vitriolic energy, I see life itself. And not wishing to infuriate you, I also see joy. I talk to you secretly. Secretly, I tell you everything I could never tell you. Oh, how to approach you in the twilight of your life, I and mine, and say something appropriate to our age. Read without saying a word. Are you even going to notice? Have you even looked my way? Since our journey began, have you raised your eyes in my direction one single time? And I'm not facing you. I feel as if you're watching me. But when I decide to connect with you silently, you're somewhere else.
I detested the way Ellie spoke to me about the unexpected man. Detested it so much I can't bear to see him again. Oh, I'm repeating myself. So I'm repeating myself. Yes, well, of course I'm repeating myself. That's what I do. What else is there to do? In fact, little Ellie, you didn't even use the phrase repeat yourself. If you had said you're repeating yourself, I would have sensed some small degree of pleasant familiarity in the you're repeating yourself. I would have discerned the affectionate bluntness of a friend. What you did say, so embarrassed you were squirming around like a woman, was, well, it's very like things you've written before. Things I've written before, which you adored, Ellie Brightling. Except now, there's been a change of idol. What you adored when it was new, undissected, on the fringes of fashion. Not original, but new. I emphasize new and not original, two diametrically opposed concepts. When it comes to it, you've never had the patience, the discreet patience for unconditional love. The craze for novelty. Is it what you are actually saying? No, it's what are you saying that's new? What's new? Who's your new idol, little Ellie? Of course, I can always find out by reading your column. Ages since I read your column. Did I ever read it? Even when you were the pioneer of my ultra novelty, acclaiming in your articles all my worst qualities. Bitter. Could I have possibly turned bitter? No.
You're a man with whom I'd like to have discussed certain things. In fact, people with whom you'd like to discuss things are not all that thick on the ground. I, who was so biased in favor of men, finished up by turning my back on their friendships. My best friends, my few rare and singular friends, are women. That women would turn out to be better friends to me than men is a development I could never have predicted. Apart from my friend Serge, who is now dead, I had another friend. His name was Georges. Georges was slightly in love with me, in that charming way men have of being slightly in love with you without expecting anything. I was married. And our friendship contained a hint of mischief, how shall I put it, a knowing closeness. I laughed a great deal with Georges, Mr. Parsky. You know how it is when you can laugh. By the way, I've often laughed in your company. One day, Georges arrived with a woman. He thought it acceptable to introduce a woman into our relationship. He committed the solecism of comparing us. I am not a woman, Mr. Parsky, who invites comparisons, nor am I a woman to be weighed against anyone or anything. 16 years of friendship, and he still hadn't grasped that. Worse, he confided in me. Worse still, he asked my advice. 16 years of pleasantly double-edged friendship collapsed in 3 sentences. The poor man didn't even realize. Of course, when I say the poor man, I'm speaking purely from my point of view, because he was, and this was what was most intolerable, he was happy. Happy, Mr. Parsky. I was very civilized about it. To have so often been civilized about things is perhaps where I've gone wrong in life. Georges married this woman. She was one of his patients. Georges is a dentist, and he had a child. We used to have lunch occasionally. We both went on pretending we were still intimates. To start with, Georges kept his end up. Our conversations, although meatless, because the meat of a conversation obviously doesn't lie in what's actually said, still retained the glow of our old conversations. And then, feeling free, God knows why, as time went on, Georges began to talk to me about his son, a certain Eric. How Georges could have called his son Eric remains a mystery to me. We never talked about my children. I have 2, although he no doubt remembered I was a mother myself. Among parents, you expect a bit of mutual unbosoming, don't you? Eric was a treasure, Mr. Parsky, a little treasure. You put him to bed, bam, he was asleep. You woke him up, he started gurgling. His little hands were so strong, his little arms were so loving. Eric sang all day long. The father was happy, the child was secure. What could be more natural? One day, Georges said to me quite seriously, with tears in his eyes, when I take him out in his pushchair, I'm sorry for the people who walk past him without smiling at him. Out of Georges's mouth, the word pushchair. Oh, the least domesticated of men, or so I thought. A man I'd known as outrageous and insolent, reduced to shreds, liquefied by paternity, and who, with no memory of himself or me, sat there boasting of his liquefaction. One evening, and I'm finally getting to what I wanted to tell you in the first place, we went to listen to some Brahms sonatas. It was a long time since we'd spent an evening together. After the concert, he took me to a Thai restaurant I particularly liked. And after dinner, we had a drink at the Creole Bar. How can I explain this to you? The whole evening had gone by under some star unshackled from time. Not a word about Eric or pushchairs, not a word about married patients, just a couple of could-be lovers, as in the past, arm in arm, laughing, faintly disreputable. He took me back to my house. He walked me. He walked me because he didn't have his car. As we walked, I felt able to flirt quite freely as before, and the air was sweet. In front of my door, where in earlier days we would linger sometimes for hours, I suddenly had the feeling he was in a hurry. We said good night with an impersonal kiss, and I watched him running. Running, Mr. Parsky. Running, racing to look for a taxi. Running desperately back to his little family, back to his own. Running like a man who'd finally snapped his chains.
I don't see why I shouldn't go back on X-Lax. X-Lax suited me. I was happy with X-Lax. John says it's dangerous. What is he, a doctor? When all said and done, I don't see why I should listen to my son, who isn't a doctor and who, not content with being round-shouldered, smokes. X-lax suited me. It was a comfortable way to download. Curious word, download. We never said download in my day. Well, X-lax was a success. Full stop. Oh, I can never remember the name of that quasi-son-in-law. Henri Gerard Remy Sledge, yes. Mr. Sledge, you're planning to live with my daughter? Don't be stupid, they've been living together for months. Mr. Sledge, you're planning to, I refuse to utter the verb marry. The verb marry is not in my repertoire. Mr. Sledge, I imagine you must appreciate a father's concerns. But if he answers, of course, I keep putting myself in your shoes, I'll strangle him with my bare hands. Now, stay cool. Don't get involved. Is it right for me to get involved in her life? I mean, what is it that counts? The long run or the moment? I mean, what is it that's really of value? In the train carrying him from Paris to Frankfurt, Paul Parsky still has no idea of the value of time. But I refuse to give in. No surrender.
You once said in an interview that as a writer, you had no opinions and that you had no intention of saying anything whatsoever on any given subject, and that you greatly admired philosophers or great mathematicians, anyone from the world of ideas, and that you yourself had done nothing but notice certain things and interpret what you'd noticed, but that never, never in a million years had your writing shown any tendency or inclination to enter the world of ideas. You said in this interview that ideas about the world were, strictly speaking, of no value in the practice of literature. Sheer hypocrisy. I've never found anything in any of your books which doesn't express in a completely personal way your view of the world. Even your energy is a view of the world. Your allergy to nuance is a view of the world. Your disinclination to do the sensible thing is a view of the world. Reading your interview, I finally grasped something unexpected. Your fear of being understood, Mr. Parsky. You cover your tracks. You personally invent protective misunderstandings because you're haunted by the fear of being understood. Pursued, yes. Understood, no. A judicious helping of impenetrability is how you avert this great misfortune and preserve your prestige intact. In The Unexpected Man, which is in my handbag, your hero, your alter ego, claims he only wanted to be someone in order to be able to abdicate. When are you, my dear writer, planning to abdicate? I see no signs of abdication anywhere. Not in your flirtatious isolation, and not in those immoderately offhand comments you squeeze out about yourself. And certainly not in your writing. In The Unexpected Man, which I have in my handbag, you don't for 1 second give up any of the illusions of the human race. If ever a man was far from giving them up, it's you, my poor old thing. It's absurd to feel intimidated by you. Really ridiculous. Mr. Parsky, chance, wonderful chance, or rather chance, quite simply. Chance has decreed that I should meet you on this train. I can't resist telling you. And what are you going to tell him? How will you fight your way back up from that kind of affectation? Mr. Parsky, I'm prepared to risk any kind of adventure with you. Just to see his face. If he laughs, If he genuinely laughs, he's the man I think he is. Oh, come on, Martha, life is short. What if he doesn't laugh? Well, if he doesn't laugh, he's not the man you think he is, so you'll wind down the window and throw out the unexpected man. And you'll be so ashamed you'll throw yourself out after it. What if he genuinely does laugh? If he genuinely does laugh. Oh, this is torture.
I could never sleep on a train. It's hard enough in bed, let alone on a train. This woman never reads anything. A woman who doesn't read anything the whole journey. Not even a spot of Mary Claire. Oh. Perhaps I should write for the theater. No, God, no. How could that even cross my mind? Something must have come loose in my brain. Besides, in the theater, the only thing I can stand is boulevard comedy, basically. At a boulevard comedy, the audience laughs like normal people. They don't laugh in that deathly way you hear these days in the palaces of culture. Laughter congratulating itself for being intelligent enough to know why it's being laughed. A little in-laugh in several stages. The way Ellie Breitling laughed during Measure for Measure. That's right, the way Ellie laughs these days. It's something new. He never used to laugh like that. No. It was a time when Ellie was in a crowd, he laughed like a normal person. A time when Ellie would have talked to me about the unexpected man in his kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning in front of his 15th Pernod Branca, and I would have hung on every word. Is there today one single person in the whole world, who might know how to read that book?
I'm not on good terms with Nadine, Serge's wife. Serge used to have adventures, and she knew I knew. She thought I condoned them. It's a pity our relationship disintegrated. Nadine always respected my friendship with Serge. She's an intelligent woman. Things deteriorated when Serge started to have adventures. Adventures may be something of an exaggeration. Anyway, as she got older, Nadine blew up like a balloon. And when a woman blows up like a balloon, a man begins to look elsewhere. I'm talking to you about Serge, Mr. Parsky, because Serge was one of your characters. He didn't like you. But if they were to read you, would your characters like you? Let's imagine Stratmer reading The Unexpected Man. I'd say he'd get impatient after about 2 pages. Like Stratmer, Serge was an insomniac. One night, when he couldn't sleep and he was tossing and turning in his bed, he tried to calm himself by thinking about Auschwitz. He conjured up the discomfort of the mattresses, the stench of the latrines, the lack of space. Here you are, he said to himself, in your soft bed with your clean sheets. You don't have some neighbour's stinking feet in your mouth. You don't have to get up and carry away that disgusting bucket. So go to sleep. Go to sleep, Serge, old chap. Just at the moment he was about to fall asleep, he said to himself, wait a minute. An idea which ought to haunt you and give you no peace, and you're using it as a soporific? A horror which you did not experience, and you're turning it into a tranquilizer? He wanted to write something about this confusion. He got out to look for some paper. Couldn't find any. I woke Nadine up, he told me. She, let's be fair, has no need to think about Auschwitz to get off to sleep. And I said, how can it be possible? How can it be possible, I said. This is what Serge told me. And you can see how calm I am. I'm saying this very calmly. How can it be possible that there is not one piece of paper in this house? I can't bear people who sleep. How can people sleep? How can they sleep well? If I may say so, Martha, Serge was 17 years older than me, and we always maintained a certain formality. If I may say so, Martha, I know you're a poor sleeper, and that is the cornerstone of our friendship. Nadine sleeps. It's her latest enthusiasm. She's a sleeper. She used to be a woman you could rely on for a conversation any time of the night. One day I shall publish my theory about sleepers. We were having lunch that day. As a hypochondriac, Serge left you standing. I said to him, "You're looking bonny." "What do you mean? I'm looking bonny? I haven't slept a wink all night and I'm looking bonny. Perhaps it's a circulation problem." He got up and went to check his complexion in the gents. Before he died, he said to me, "I don't want a single word spoken at my funeral. Be so good as to be there to check. As for music, I'd be happy with Schumann, but I wouldn't want to seem too romantic." Be honest, Mr. Parsky. Serge is one of your characters, isn't he? Oh, Mr. Parsky. I miss my friend Serge terribly.
To think all those years, and I knew nothing about Debussy. 30 years without hitting a note of Debussy. I got through Claire de Lune all right the day before yesterday. For the teacher to suggest La Cathédrale engloutie, he must have been impressed by the progress I've made. It's a good idea to take up the piano again. There's been a maturing, a mental leap forward. How could Natalie have said to me that Yuri plays better than I do? Has she no ear? Well, of course, it's true I don't attempt the same pieces as Mr. Yuri Kozlov. I don't attempt Scriabin. I don't play Il Joyeuse. I'm too fond of music. He even plays Scarbo. It's all wrong. Tempo shot to hell, bum notes from beginning to end, plays like an old Jewish refugee in a bar. And my own daughter is taken in. She tells me, "I don't know how to use the pedal." Well, she's right. In any case, I use it less and less. Pieces which require the pedal are few and far between. Even Schubert. Even with Schubert, I manage that impromptu very well without bothering with the pedal. I play it very efficiently. All right, in an ideal world, you'd use the pedal if you knew how to, but without the pedal, it's not bad at all. In fact, it's rather good. Yuri knows all about the pedal. No. When Yuri sits down at the piano, his Japanese is ecstatic. Yuri will play in front of anyone. He has no shame. The more he hits the pedal, the better his Japanese likes it. It's true. I'm ready to attempt La Cathédrale engloutie. There are two reasons behind my progress. First, I'm getting better and better at sight reading. Thanks to Bach, I've gotten used to a very strong, quick left hand which compels you to anticipate. And secondly, I've succeeded in hearing myself. It's easy enough to hear other people play. It's hearing oneself. That's what's difficult. I have to ask my teacher to let me work on some of Walzenen. I've always had a feeling for Schumann. Now that I've matured, Vogel as Prophet. That's what I must play. That will be my next piece. You know, if I were a painter, I'd draw this woman's face. It's a disturbing face. Cold. No. Disturbingly indifferent. A woman who might fire the imagination.
When Serge said to me before he died that he wanted Schumann at his funeral, but that he was afraid of seeming too romantic, I laughed. Of course I laughed. But he said, "How can you laugh? Don't you remember when you had your hip operation and were convinced you'd never come round from the anaesthetic? You said to me, 'If I die, whatever you do, don't let them put my age in Le Figaro.' Which of us is more frivolous? Frivolous beyond the grave we are." How to accept that somebody we loved is dead. How to accept that the world contains one less person to love us. My parents are gone. Husband I love, gone. So many friends gone. Serge, dead. How to accept never being in control of time or loneliness. It was a good idea to have my hair done before I left. Last time she made it too blonde, but this time she's done it well. And I was right to wear my pink suit. I needn't have worried I'd be cold in it, and it gives me an air of mystery. If that idiotic writer deigned to glance over in my direction, he would see me at my best. At least that's some satisfaction. Do you really think man hasn't changed since the Stone Age? I'm dying to ask you the question. Do you really think, as you maintain the whole way through The Unexpected Man, that man's knowledge is the only thing about him that's evolved? It's not your invention, the theory that knowledge makes no difference. Of course it isn't. But you develop it with such bitterness. Your outlook is so bitter. If I insist on talking to you, even though it's in secret, about Serge, it's because in my mind there are so many ways the two of you are connected. One day, I called him stupidly excited about the fall of the Berlin Wall. Fine, he said. Yes, so what? Its coming down won't improve the behavior of mankind. Deep down, I wonder if there wasn't a touch of jealousy in his antipathy towards you. It must have annoyed him that I kept unearthing his character and his thoughts in your books. Another time we were talking about Tiananmen Square, and he said, I couldn't care less about the Chinese students. I still prefer the Iranians. I prefer whirling dervishes to human rights. Serge, always excessive. Like Stratmer. Like you. Not an ounce of self-restraint. An attractiveness essentially based on character flaws. I was so low when I packed last night. Do men ever suffer that kind of low? Still felt sad this morning. Sad at the station. The woman who travels from Paris to Frankfurt with nothing else to read but The Unexpected Man is a deeply depressed woman. One day I'd like someone to explain to me why sadness always catches you by surprise when everything seems under control. Oh, what the hell? I'm fetching out the book. I'll place myself so he can see me. He can't not react. He can't watch me embarking on an intimate relationship with him 6 feet away without revealing himself. What are you going to do in Frankfurt? Book fair? No. First of all, I don't think it's that time of year. And a writer with your nature, flirtatiously antisocial, doesn't turn up at the book fair. What can you be doing there? Oh, God. Make him speak to me.
What's she going to do in Frankfurt? Visit a relative? Work? She has a lover in the industry. Yes. She doesn't have a husband. She has a lover in the petrochemical industry. That's excellent. She's quite simply German. No. Why? Why isn't she German? At any rate, if she's German, she's not from Frankfurt. No, she isn't a German. Germans don't look out of the window like that. She's a woman who's going somewhere, not a woman who's coming back. What's it matter if she's German or what she is? But yes, the worm is in the bud. I have to know him. I'll approach her. Please Excuse me, you think we might open the window a bit?
Yes. Yes, it is quite warm, by all means. You answered my prayer. Such a trivial prayer, and you answered it. Listen to a couple of insignificant words which could have no possible bearing on the higher course of time and tide. Oh God, have I ever once prayed to you without asking for a favour? Maybe I ought not to get to know you, Mr. Posky. Suppose I don't like you. Why take the risk of no longer being able to love anything about you? I'm told there isn't necessarily an intimate link between a man and his work. How can that be possible? I should have said something else instead of smiling like a fool. I was caught on the hop. Now he's sunk back deep in his thoughts. What a dimwit. After all, I have a perfect right to break the silence as well, even if I only do it once. But what would I say? Something absolutely banal would be most appropriate, least heavy. Whatever else happens, I don't want to make him think I'm jumping feet first into a conversation. What leads on from the window?
French. I knew it. French. And the 15 words, I hinted a conductor. Oh, why not? He's got to conduct the Nacht. Afterwards, you'll spend the night in Wiesbaden. Friday, you'll be in Mans, where you'll buy a painting which strongly resembles you by some minor Cinquecento master. The painting is called The Portrait and Dream of Giovanni Alviste. In it, you're leaning forward slightly, 3/4 in shadow, looking out of a window at a blurred landscape with a bridge. Both of you stop dead in front of the painting in the antique shop because there on the canvas, melancholy in the moonlight, are your unmistakable features. Your very particular eyes, gazing out in a distinctively watchful and supercilious way. You buy the painting? No, not you. The conductor buys the painting. He tells you he's going to keep it in his bedroom so he can contemplate you every day with complete impunity. You laugh. You laugh and try to remember who you were when you were Giovanna Alviste. A splinter of life among so many others. A tiny pinprick in time amid so much pointless loneliness. So many heaped up splinters, scraps of dead wood scattered across our paths. It's bitter. Why did I pay for Mrs. Serda to go to Biarritz? What could have prompted such generosity? Her great bollocks of a son was there. She was hoping to avert some cock-up by offering him a scooter. But, I've always regretted my moments of virtue, all those noble gestures after the event. Well, I've always discovered some tainted reason for having made them. Mrs. Serda has been a complete wreck since the collapse of communism. The only life Mrs. Serda knew was standing firm against the Reds. In a case like that, what's the use of Biarritz? Oh, Natalie told me that, what's his name again? Sleds adored a passerby like any other. Yeah? Well, people keep talking to me about books I wrote 30 years ago. I can't even remember what it was about. Seriously, I've no idea. He liked a passerby like any other. Well, so did everybody else. Great. Obviously, he read it a couple of weeks ago, and as far as he's concerned, it's the present. Paul Parsky in the present, whereas for me, it's a book written by somebody quite other. There is some misunderstanding about time. What we produce stagnates, ossifies, only plays an important part in other people's minds. In time, what a man produces becomes what's furthest from him. To start with, what's he doing reading a passerby like any other instead of, let's say, the Remark, which is far better, not to mention the Unexpected Man. Well, actually, I would have been, well, disappointed. I would have been disapproved of him reading The Unexpected Man because it's too recent. All in all, I prefer that he's dug up the passerby rather than plunging into the unexpected man. Plunging into the unexpected man before he'd met me would have been the worst sort of blunder. Mr. Sledge, my trip to Frankfurt has given me a chance to reassess our situation. What do you mean, our? You couldn't care less about my situation. Well, that's exactly what I have against him. He has no consideration for me.
I like travelling. As soon as I set foot in Frankfurt, I shall be another person. The one who arrives is always another person. And so it is that one progresses from one person to another until it's all over. Mr. Parsky, you rested your eyes on me in a certain way. There was a question mark in your bright eyes. For a brief instant in your life, possibly imperceptible even to yourself, I'm sure I had some effect on you. What was your question? Whatever it is, the answer's yes. Yes, it's me. I'm the one who secretly one day will make off with your world. I'm the one I'll make off with your light, your face, your happy hours or sad, the days and nights your name is on, the whole of time to ashes. I'm the one who loved you, who coloured you according to my inclinations, the one who studied every subject under your perpetual catechism. I shall abolish you. I shall make off with you when my time is up, and nothing will remain of you or of anything else. That was my answer when you rested your eyes on me and spoke to me of fresh air. I have a brother who lives in Paris, older than me. We keep on talking about other people because we're made up of other people, don't you agree? As a writer, you know that better than anyone. My brother lives in Paris, in a handsome apartment building in the 17th arrondissement. The hallway in his building is paved with white, beige, and black flagstones. He's been living in his building for 25 years, and for 25 years, every day that God sends, my brother has only stepped on the light-coloured flagstones, alternating, according to a very precise and never varying formula, between white and beige. Never in 25 years has he stepped on a black flagstone. And anybody with him is forbidden to step on the black flagstones, which are somehow more tempting than the others. When he inadvertently passes the concierge on whom he's never dared impose his ban, he closes his eyes so as not to witness her sacrilege. He told me he was petitioning the Residents' Association to have her replaced because, and I quote, she was an irresponsible woman who, in defiance of all common sense, was pulverizing the chessboard. My brother is convinced that the world order depends on the flawlessness of his passage. A world order which comprises all possible journeys, including, Mr. Parsky, ours in this Paris to Frankfurt train. And if in turn I make so bold as to address you, it will be because in the great labyrinth of life, my brother or I, according to the rules, have happened to stand on the correct stone. Right. That's enough philosophizing. We're already beyond Strasbourg. Time for action. Some banal phrase. No. I'm fetching out the book. Funniest thing would be if he didn't even notice. Come on, Martha, employ a little cunning in the way you read. Discreet, but unmistakably strong on presence. My heart is beating. I'm 12 years old. Oh, what a trip.
How many times in my youth did I think Ah, old age, happiness, calm, no more pretense. Boom. Ah, old age. Now what's it look like? An old boy with a rancorous expression, the kind of man who takes umbrage when his old friend Brightling utters the ghost of a reservation. No, no, it wasn't the ghost of a reservation. Let's not understate it. If we didn't care what people said to us, why would we struggle on with a pursuit which is at the mercy of outside opinion? An old man, enthralled to the judgments of his contemporaries, condemned, whatever he may say, to try to put a good face on it. But for whose benefit? For whose ben? She's reading. She's reading The Unexpected Man. Ooh, ooh, extraordinary. What's she got to? Page 120. Extraordinary. 120. Stratmerson Hospital. He's already met Rubens. She must have read the chapter about the counting mania. Or else she's in the middle of it. No, no, she's not laughing. She must have finished reading it, unless she's in the middle of it and doesn't think it's funny. No, no, no. This woman would be laughing, I'm sure of it. She must have gone past it. You couldn't read about the counting mania without at least smiling. Oh, she is smiling. She's smiling. Uh, she's in the middle of it. Stratmer meets Rubens, who talks to him about the counting mania, which Stratmer also suffers from, one of many. Don't stare at her so insistently, you'll break her concentration. Extraordinary. She doesn't know who I am. No, no, of course not. She wouldn't be so innocently reading like that. She doesn't know who I am. Why didn't she start reading it when we set off? Lack of interest? No, no, no. Just look at her expression. A good face on it, but for whose benefit? For whose benefit, my old Parsky? Huh? Why for hers? Why, for your unforeseen traveling companion, this silent woman sent to you by fate, the focus of your beseeching gaze. She's reading The Unexpected Man. It's too much. I knew she was an interesting woman. Shall I remain anonymous? Huh? Why wasn't she reading it when we set off? But because she had other things to think about. In Frankfurt, she's going to break up with the conductor. She was thinking about methods of breaking up, about turns of phrase to use when breaking up with the conductor. In their relationship, they've always weighed their words. She's going to break up with the conductor, and The Unexpected Man is the book chosen as witness to this moment. Remain anonymous? Absolutely. But are likely to feel some sort of bitterness as usual? I mean, what's the point of these scruples, which will probably deprive me of a simple pleasure? Anyway, it's not so much scruples as you hasten to flatter yourself. It's more like discretion, not to say cowardice. Isn't the benefit I might derive from this strange occurrence by simply remembering it and passing it on to others, isn't that enough? No, not enough. I have to reveal myself, but maybe in 2 stages.
As far as my daughter's concerned, Stratmer, I consider myself unclean. I've always been afraid of infecting her. I was tidying away some fish scraps in the kitchen when I spotted a slice of lime. I licked it. I like the taste. It reminds me of Mexico. I put it back on the table. I said to myself, you can't leave it there, contaminated, where anyone could pick it up. You can't throw it away. It cost you 1 franc 75. It's a lime. They're hard to come by. So I bit into it and chewed it until it was ready to be thrown away. During these 5 minutes of oral acidity, I performed the electrified dance imposed on me by my limbs and took the opportunity to tot up the number of cupboard handles in the room, items which, curiously enough, I had never previously counted. How strange that I was telling you about my brother. This counting mania is exactly what my brother suffers from. My brother is the victim of counting mania, and to that extent, he's also a part of your universe. Oh my God, what you write about is so familiar to me. And you're so far away. I've made a mistake. You're not going to speak to me. There was a time, Mr. Parsky, when I had no need to get embroiled in books and handbags and failures of nerves. I was beautiful, and that spoke for me. He's seen me. He's watching me. He's seen the book. Here we go. I didn't wear my pink suit for nothing. I didn't get into this compartment for nothing. Nothing's for nothing. I'll count to 20 and then I'll say, what will you say, Martha? I'll say, think of the sentence and then count.
The famous author goes on a journey and sits opposite an unknown woman who's reading his latest book. Good subject for a short story, a bit old-fashioned. Could have been written by whom? Stefan Zweig. Yes. Manuel Torga. Yes. Man intimidated. Man who prides himself on having outgrown such childishness is suddenly touched by the indelicacy of the situation. The woman's attractive. Would he be intimidated if the woman wasn't attractive? If the woman wasn't attractive, he would withdraw into his distaste for what's called the public, that breed never to be encountered. Let's be honest. You've never done anything for no reason or for nobody. You don't create in a void. You throw bottles into the sea, desperately hoping for a castaway. To produce, to add to the world is to experience the magic of possibility. Here goes. How would you account for the need to invent or dream up other lives? Isn't it quite simply enough to exist? What do you think?
I don't know what you mean by quite simply to exist. There's no such thing as quite simply.
Ah, that book you're holding, it so happens I've read it as well.
Oh, really?
Do you like it?
I'm not sure I can answer such a blunt question. This is an author I've been close to for some time.
You as well?
You as well?
For some time, yes. What have you read?
A passerby like any other. A small collection of short stories, can't remember the title. The Remark, The Poor Man's Footstep.
Did you like The Poor Man's Footstep?
Oh, yes. Yes, for me, it's the most moving.
Hmm.
What about you?
Oh, I remember it as being quite a personal book.
Yes. Yes, that's what I'd say. Personal. Inevitable. And which must have felt inevitable to the man who wrote it.
Could be. You can't always write like that.
No, I'm sure.
You can only lay yourself naked once.
I'm sure.
You don't want to talk to me about this book?
I can't talk about it before I've finished it.
Oh, yes, you can. I mean, the ending has no significance.
Well, the book says the same thing to me as that photograph of Prague above your head. It's given me yet again a nostalgia for what's never taken place, a nostalgia for what might happen. Does it deal with anything else?
Don't you find it irritatingly repetitious?
Oh, yes, but I never read without being irritated. He's a deeply irritating writer.
He certainly is.
You find him irritating as well?
Yes, irritating, very irritating. Are you going to Frankfurt?
Yes.
He's an irritating writer, and in my view, a minor writer. You're quite wrong to interest yourself in him.
Irritating, yes. Minor, no. Everything you love is irritating.
He's a selfish little busybody who has never been able to turn a single moment into an eternity, which is the mark of a poet. He can't speak of death except cynically, sniggering like some pathetic old hag. He claims to hate the crowd and the masses, but he's never known how to describe man's unhappiness. The only sadness he can talk about is his own, about which he is maniacally repetitious. There's a sentence he envies in an elegy by Borges. On the other side of the door, Borges says, a man made out of love, of time, and of loneliness has just been weeping in Buenos Aires for everything that is. You see, Tchaikovsky has never known how to weep for everything that is.
I think you're very unfair. But I don't believe you mean it, since you said all that with the kind of effrontery which implies the opposite. In the remark, he sees a middle-aged woman in a metro station, a fat woman with a shawl and a heavy coat. She's crying. Her face is pressed up against the grubby white tiles of the wall, right next to a poster for Holiday on Ice. She has slippers on her feet and a heavy coat, and ankle socks pulled up over her swollen calves. He describes her feet, her slippers, the bruised skin between her socks and her coat, and through this, the whole of her life, her entire life, in 5 lines. In another book, he talks about watching his grandfather out of the window as he turns the corner by the house and tiptoes away like a child, clutching the results of his medical tests. And in The Unexpected Man, come to that, there's that woman who has lunch by herself every Sunday at the Blue Sea Hotel in Royan, plastered with makeup, her hair dyed, dressed in pink, ridiculed and sneered at by everybody, about whom, nevertheless, you say that she was kindness itself. All these things and so many others you describe, Mr. Parsky, have made me weep. You have no right to be bitter. In your books, there have been hundreds of moments like eternity. And if I have to prove myself worthy of whatever devil has dropped me down in this compartment, I'm forced to admit that I've been madly in love with you, and that in another life, since I wouldn't like to embarrass you, I would have taken off with you on any kind of adventure.